But let me be very clear about this. I think that we need to define what are military weapons and what are sporting and self-defense weapons. And the military weapons need to stay with the military, and the sporting and self-defense and target practice weapons are available to the civilian population. B, if you're going to have a weapon, I think it should be registered, and its serial number should be registered, and it should be, just like a car. You register a car, it should be insured, and there should be liability insurance. So if you accidentally kill the kid next door or wound him, so he's stuck in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, your insurance will pay to take care of him for the rest of his life, because more people are wounded or commit suicide with guns than are rescued or shot in self-defense with guns. And C, that if you are going to own a gun, you should take some sort of training. And here's a great opportunity for the NRA. I actually went through a course that was co-sponsored by the NRA in gun safety. They do a pretty good job of this stuff. So that people should demonstrate their proficiency, and they should get licensed. So it's just like with cars. You have a license, you prove that you know how to operate the thing because it's something that can kill people. You have insurance because it's something that can kill people or maim people, and it is registered. This seems to me like real common sense stuff.
I agree. I just want your opinion on this. Seriously, I have a friend of mine. He's an NRA member. When I tell him that in New York State, where I live, where you purchase a gun, I mean, it's a federal law, from what I understand. They have to do a background check on you. They have to register the weapon. Right. Now, his argument is this, and I want your opinion on this, that he does not want the government to know he has a weapon, because the purpose is that if he has a gun and the government is becoming tyrannical, he does not want... What's the first thing the government's going to do? They're going to go to a registry and say, okay, we need to go confiscate these people's guns. And he always uses...
No, it's not. That's not the first thing the government's going to do.
Hitler took guns away. Stalin took guns away.
No, it's actually, that's not true. Two things.
I know.
Let's just go through this really quickly here, okay? You've seen enough TV to, even if it's just, video of the Republican National Convention, to know what how militarized our police are these days. Do you really think that one guy with a whole pile of weapons, or even a whole bunch of people in a house with a whole pile of weapons, like David Koresh tried to do down in Waco, are going to successfully take on our government? Any of our governments?
I don't, but what they're saying is that this is the argument.
No, I know the argument. The government is tyrannical. Now, first of all, who defines tyrannical? But nonetheless, the government's tyrannical. They're going to come and take your gun. No, the government they're not going to just take your gun. They're going to take you. And they're going to put you in jail, or they're going to put you in some concentration camp, and they're going to haul you off to death camps and kill you. And that was the experience of people in Nazi Germany. That's not America. And if it ever were America, I'm telling you, having a gun in your home is not going to stop it. It just speeds up the rate of the massacre.
His argument is, how do you prevent it ever becoming a Nazi Germany?
You participate in politics. The Nazis took over Germany by taking over the political process. They did it in the ballot box.
Well, let me ask you then. His latest thing is this. If you look at Syria, he says the people in Syria wish they had a Second Amendment. That's his biggest thing, because Assad would be taken out. That is
the exact perfect example of where that argument falls apart, Damien. Look at the difference between Syria and I'm going to do that right now. Look at the difference between Syria and Egypt. You have two Middle Eastern countries, very similar cultures, same language, largely the same religions, so a lot in common, okay? So that we can take out a lot of variables. Very different responses to a tyrannical government. In Egypt, people stood up and came to Tahrir Square every single day, thousands, tens of thousands of people, women pushing children in baby carriages, young people, students. None of them had weapons. The military shot at them a couple of times, and the people in Tahrir Square said, do not bring weapons, do not shoot back. A number of people died, 20, 30, 40, 50, I don't know the number. It was a relatively small number, but a number of people were actually killed by the government. And that strengthened the revolution, because it was a peaceful, nonviolent revolution. Those people stood, and they had right on their side, because they were not shooting back at the government, just like Martin Luther King had right on his side. And so that nonviolent movement, in a matter of just a few weeks, or maybe a month or so, was able to bring down Hosni Mubarak. Egypt the entire Egyptian government, which was the largest and one of the richest and most powerful governments, and numerically certainly the largest in the entire Middle East, fell because of a nonviolent revolution. Now, on the other hand, in Syria, Bashir al-Assad goes out and he says, whatever his name, I mix up my Bashirs. I think Bashir al-Assad is the head of Sudan, but whatever his name. Bashir says, we're going to, people say we're going to have an uprising. We're going to do like Egypt did. They show up in the streets, and so the government shoots at them. Now, if those people had stood like they did in Egypt and said, okay, take your best shot. 10,000 of us are going to come tomorrow. You kill 10,000 of us, 20,000 of us are going to come tomorrow. I don't think probably more than a few hundred people would have died before that government fell, just like in Egypt. But instead, the United Nations told us last week that over 60,000 people have died so far in Syria. Why? Because all over Syria you have these armed militias. You have the equivalent of the Michigan militia and the Georgia militia. You got these groups of people who have lots and lots of weapons, and they're saying to the government, we're going to take you out with an AK-47. And the government says, fine, we're going to bring in a fighter jet, drop a bomb on your head.
You got a point, but I guess they're saying is that the first thing that a Stalin or a Hitler would do is to disarm.
But they're wrong. The first thing that Hitler did is he got all the people with him, or the majority of the people, the Christian majority in Germany, with him. Hitler was the most popular politician, arguably, in the history of Europe. He was on the cover of Time magazine here in the United States twice in the 1930s as Man of the Year. I mean, Lindbergh, the famous aviator, was out there saying, oh, you guys are misunderstanding Hitler. This was in the mid-30s, of course, before, we went to war with him. But he was incredibly popular. He used politics to seize power. If you're concerned about your government going crazy, you need to get involved in your government. You need to become your government. The last thing you need to do is stock up on weapons, because if your government ever does go crazy, your weapons are going to be useless. You cannot take on...
I mean, their argument is, if you look at the people in Vietnam, they stood up to America and such, and the people fought back for their homeland. That's
absolutely true. That is absolutely true, Damien. And they were fighting off foreigners, just like we fought off the British, who were foreigners. But Jefferson was like 5 generations in North America. Most of the people who were involved in the Revolution, multiple generations in this country, they thought of themselves as Americans, not as British subjects. They fought off foreigners. But when you look at violent revolutions within countries where people brought down their own government violently, there are 2 that come to mind immediately. The first is the French Revolution. What happened? The French Revolution led right to the terrors, the guillotine, lots and lots of people murdered. And then what came back? I mean, go see Les Mis. I strongly recommend you go see that movie, Les Mis. What came back was the kings. The revolution failed. The Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. Let's rise up with violence. What do you get? You end up with a Stalin and a Lenin. You end up with a disaster. Violent revolution doesn't work. On the other hand, Mahatma Gandhi in India said, we're going to have a revolution non-violently. Just like Martin Luther King here in the United States, we're going to have a revolution non-violently. And what did he do? He overthrew the British. So, yeah, I think that, overthrowing a foreign government, good idea, but indigenous, it doesn't work.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
I mean, people need to just think through the logic of this. If you're concerned about the government, become the government.